Welcome to the Marvy Woods Football Academy podcast. In this season, I'm going to be speaking to academy managers from the Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, and some Scottish clubs. As an academy parent myself, I want to bring some insight into how these academies are being run. I find that it's easy to approach coaches. I hear from players, ex-players, and parents on many platforms about their experiences in academies. But I do not hear from academy managers. This is why I want to do this season. If you think first team managers have playing staff of 18 to 25, whereas academy managers have a playing staff of over 100. That could be from the under 9s to the under 18s. These are people who are so powerful, but they just seem like these men in grey suits or women in grey suits that you just never get to hear from. So what I want to do is I want to bring to you, the listener, what they think, what they want to sign, and what they are looking for in these academies. So if you like this episode, don't just watch and keep it to yourself. Subscribe to see more and spread the word. Welcome to the Marvy Woods Football Academy podcast. Thank you for joining me on this episode where I have a former Scottish footballer and now academy manager of Portsmouth Football Club, Mr. Greg Miller. Thanks for joining me, Greg.
Yeah, good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for having me on, Marvy.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I just want to start to take it back a little bit before we get into the where you are now, where you started off as a footballer. Obviously, I know your story, but I just want you to let the people know who you are. So what was the first professional academy that you played for, if you want to call it School of Excellence or whatever?
Yeah, so I'm obviously of an age where academies weren't quite in situ, as you
We're
say.
both of that age.
Reference as schools of excellence. And also in those days and age, you could actually go to multiple because there was no registration process. The registration process only started at called an S form at schoolboy level, which was from under 13s upwards in Scotland. So kind of under 11s, under 12s. I was training at Rangers Football Club and training at Hibernians Football Club and training at Celtic Football Club, the latter of which asked me to actually sign schoolboy forms.
Oh, nice.
But I felt at that stage, my family and I, as a young 13-year-old, to travel from Edinburgh to Glasgow for 2 nights a week training and then be committed into their games programme when I already had a father working in football. He at that point was the first team manager of Hibernian.
Oh, nice.
So I kind of left my options open. His name's Alec Miller.
Oh, okay.
So I come from a sort of family of being involved. I've been in a dressing room since probably the age of 5, since he's been a manager. Things were very different in those day and age. I could go on the pitch after the game and have a kickabout with my brother and such like. But yeah, we've had lots of good experiences as a family in football.
Oh, that's brilliant. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree then?
Sometimes, yeah.
So you was at the development centre kind of thing for...
Yeah, so stayed in there, quite frankly, all through high school. And I was actually a late developer physically. So leaving high school at 16 was never going to be an option really for me. Probably didn't have the physical stature to cope with a full-time training program that could have been on offer by a professional club. So I chose to finish high school whilst at that point I'd really sort of just focused on Hibs Academy. Obviously it wasn't an academy at that stage. Playing grassroots, training with Hibs. Then probably my big break came the start of my under 17 season we got invited in for pre-season, and I'd worked really hard over the summer just to try and move my physical levels on, stamina, speed, a little bit of power, and I showed up really, really well doing this sort of more physical oriented content that was perhaps in pre-seasons of several years ago as opposed to the pre-season players experience now. And I then got invited that season to play for their third team in the Reserve League East. And ultimately it was on a Monday or a Tuesday night, being thrown in against lower league teams who were maybe playing their subs from the weekend. So you were in against men, and just learning how to cope playing against men, both the emotions, the physical challenge alongside the technical challenge that brought. And I found that that was a really, really good season for me to set me off on a pathway that I wanted to be a footballer. And when I finished school at 18, I was lucky enough to get offered professional terms and I signed full time.
For
18
for
for Hibernian.
nice. What position did you play?
So I started off as a centre forward stroke right winger and made my debut as a right winger as a 20-year-old in the Premier League in Scotland. But I then transitioned through time probably into more of a central midfielder. There was a lot of good things to have come of that experience as a full-time footballer, but equally a lot of hardship, a lot of challenges. Football changed dramatically. The Bosman rule came into effect, and Scottish football then opened its doors to a much wider football audience. So there was recruitment of players from Holland, Scandinavia. It really was going deep into Europe at that point. And unfortunately for me, I didn't quite establish myself as a regular starter in the first team. So after 6 seasons at 2 professional clubs in the Scottish Premier League and 1 in the Championship, I decided to move to being a part-time footballer, still on a professional basis. And I also moved into getting a job during the day. So it was kind of working in banking by day,
Wow.
training in football 2, sometimes 3 nights a week, playing in the Scottish League One on the Saturday. And that was me for the next 6 seasons until I kind of embarked upon my coaching career.
How how was that transition? Like 1 minute you're on the terraces and then next minute you're in the bank.
Yeah, so I was quite pragmatic in regards that sometimes you can give something your all, which I felt I had. And ultimately, I hadn't done enough to convince the managers that I played for that I should be a regular starter at a level that allows you to sustain a full-time career. And obviously, with the size of population in Scotland, there is a lot of clubs that are not full-time. So therefore, for me, it made sense to look at signing for one of those clubs and getting a secondary career as a sort of backstop. But deep down, my goal was always to keep playing away until such age as I did my coaching qualifications, and then hopefully showcase enough talent within the coaching sphere to transition into a full-time coaching role.
Interesting. So as a kid, when you was like you say 17, when you was going to the games or matches at the clubs, who used to take you?
It would be my mum. My dad was working non-stop, being a first-team manager. It's 24/7. So it was my mum who, to be fair, was fantastic. She took me everywhere. My brother was involved in football for a few years, so she had kind of experienced it all, and she was the one standing on the sideline. My dad would come along now and again if the opportunity arose, and I was always very proud when he did come along, especially when I did make it into the pro ranks and he got to see me play, because obviously it gave me a lot of guidance along the way, a lot of advice, a lot of support. But yeah, I guess when I think to my current situation and looking after so many players in our environment, the commitment families make to get their children to and from football academies is just outstanding, and they should be applauded for that. And although we sometimes don't always see eye to eye with parents, based on maybe our assessment of their child. Ultimately, the effort they make to get their child there with the frequency needed in modern day academies is really outstanding.
Yeah. What were your car conversations like with mum after your matches? Car conversations are very important for a football parent and the kids. Did you get any like, what was you doing? Did you run down that way, or was it just, oh, you was brilliant?
No, my mum was probably quite quiet, to be honest. She kind of left the assessment up to myself. I think
Right.
because I'd been surrounded by professional football for so many years and probably had a degree of understanding of what you should be able to undertake to deliver a strong performance versus a weak performance. And I guess just be brave enough to critique that performance, especially when you're getting to 15, 16, 17. You will respect if you're going to survive in one of the harshest environments, you have to be able to self-appraise and self-appraise accurately. So kind of just left me to crack on with that. But for sure, if my dad was there, there was always a bit more critique on the way home.
How did you deal with that? He's smiling.
Yeah, listen, it wasn't always good at the time because, like any young person, you're trying to perform to the best of your abilities. And of course, maybe the lack of maturity in you at times will look to maybe pinpoint blame elsewhere. But I think what was really useful with him was always bringing it back to myself. Actually, well, let's not look at these other parameters. Let's not look at the ifs, the buts, and the maybes. Let's look at yourself. What was it you did versus what did you need to do? So it kind of did prove a real good benchmark for me evaluating my performance.
Yeah, I hear that. You reach 15, 16, you're playing football. How did you deal with the distractions that comes along at those ages, like females, drink, drugs, partying? How did you navigate that kind of situation in regards to trying to stay focused as a footballer, or did it distract you?
No, quite the opposite. I had this passion from probably the ages of 7, 8 to move into football. That passion grew as my age progressed. And I started looking after myself. So when I was 14, I cut out fizzy drinks. I never had a fizzy drink. I just knew that it wasn't going to fuel my diet appropriately for the number of times I was playing sport. I had quite a healthy lifestyle. I made the decision as well to make sure that my only night out would be the Saturday night, even if it was just going 16, 17 invited to parties. The only party I would contemplate was after my game had finished. I'd never go out in the nights leading up to it. And I think, to be fair, my father was quite a disciplinarian, and that rubbed off on me. And I had a goal, and nothing was going to stand in the way of me achieving that goal.
And so did you see that kind of discipline from your dad as you was growing up, or because not every normal person gets to have that window for you to know at 14, right, I need to cut this out or I need to cut that out? Like, did he drive into you like diet is important? Because back then, if you think, like, it seems like in the British game, well, in the English game, when Wenger came over, is when all this dietary stuff was introduced. So for you to know that in Scotland at such a young age, that's very interesting.
Yeah, to be fair to my dad, he was an early adopter. He was one of the tutors also for the Scottish Football Association license courses, the UEFA license course. And probably as early as 1990, he was blood testing his players during pre-season in conjunction with a sports university to look at lactic levels. So he was very open-minded to evolving his understanding of where football was going to be going and how he as a manager had to move and evolve with that. And I guess I was fortunate enough to be party to him sharing that sort of best practice and new methods and early adoption of those new methods into sport. And he certainly wasn't involved with a team that always had the best quality of players or the best budget. But one thing that led him to be able to do was always get his team really, really fit. And his team then could compete on occasions with your Rangers and your Celtics, etc., who had multi-million-pound budgets in those days.
Yeah. So what was the benefit of cutting out fizzy drinks? What did that do for you?
Just for me, it was spiking sugar levels. It was actual rehydration. I was still at 14. I was probably training football 4 nights a week with different teams, playing Saturday, playing Sunday. And if you think back to probably in those days, there was a lot more sugar content in fizzy drinks. It probably wasn't as regulated. It was then, therefore, the spike in your blood sugar, the lack of hydration it actually does give the body. So for me, it was quite a simplistic move to either water or water mixed with a light squash like a black currant or an orange. And it was just about making sure that I was in good shape. Gyms weren't necessarily a thing in those days for young males and females to go and join a gym. It wasn't a thing. So it was about doing home exercises, sit-ups, press-ups, just sort of body conditioning content that would make you a little bit more robust on a football field. And as I say, because I was a late developer, I knew that I had to try and give myself advantages in other areas perhaps that would help me compensate the lack of growth. It wasn't probably until I was 15 that I started kind of growing, to be honest.
That's very interesting to know that you did that at such a young age. And yeah, I commend you for that. I mean, did you see better players not doing such things and have that affect their career as well?
Yeah, 100%. I am a strong believer that hard work will without anyone trying their talent's fantastic. I obviously had a degree of talent to make it to being a professional footballer, but my hard work outweighed my talent. Whereas I would say if an individual's talent outweighs their hard work, and by a long way, then I've seen a lot of those players just never get anywhere close to making it.
Right, right. That's very interesting. How did you transition into the academy job then?
So my current academy job, you mean at present?
Yeah, so for example, you left the bank and did you just like go into academy football or what how did that transition?
No, so that path was 4 seasons working part-time in academies. The first season at Hibernian's Academy, and then the next 3 seasons at Rangers Academy. And having worked in those 2 academies, I felt I'd gained enough experiences, so started looking for full-time employment. Fortunately for me, I had been recognised by my national association as someone who could potentially go on and work in the pro game. So I was accepted onto UEFA A licenses, youth license, had concluded all of them. Whilst in my time at Rangers, I had some good feedback from respective people who were working in the Scottish game who were maybe coming up against me as another coach, or they were an academy manager. And quite frankly, I was then afforded a work opportunity by my father, who was working now abroad. And I went and worked with him at a first team level abroad. That was a really, really good experience. It was one that I had been working up towards for 5 years. I had been coaching at that point, and it gave me the platform to learn from first team players. It gave me the
In what
need
country?
to. It was in Japan, working
Oh,
in the
nice.
J League, in the Premier League in Japan.
Yeah.
That was obviously very tough. I had to coach through an interpreter. So you're learning new customs and how to adapt and navigate those customs. The biggest challenge that I experienced out there was probably my first time whereby the club were signing a lot of the players through the sporting director, and the manager was having to select his squad from players that he hadn't had an input signing.
Yeah.
And that in itself, as you know, rarely ends well. And true, after, 9.5 months in that environment, our time was cut short. The manager, who was very experienced at that stage, just didn't feel it was an environment he wanted to continue working in. I dare say the club were quite happy as well when all parties agreed to go their separate ways. And for me, that was a real crossroads about trying to stay in the professional game at first team level, knowing that obviously there is lots of fascination with it, there's lots of excitement with it, and there's lots that can fuel you as a coach. But you also have to consider the risk, and the risk is it's a very short employment quite often. So for me, I probably leaned back upon my known safety of developmental football, but it was also a great passion of mine. Even in Japan, I put in place individual learning plans for every player under the age of 25 in my first team, and they'd never had that before, because I do not feel that a first team player is the finished article. And why would you stop someone's development just because they reach a certain age? So that was something that's kind of stuck with me the whole time. So I went and worked with a club for a few months, went back into the banking for a few months, and then I transitioned into a full-time role as a high-performance coach with the Scottish Football Association. It was revolutionary. It was at the end of 2011, moving into 2012. They had studied the Belgian FA model around improving the national team from a country with a relatively small population base. And one of the approaches that Scotland wanted to do was open 7 high-performance centres, whereby the kid came to that high school, you manipulated the timetable, and they were coached every single day by a team of high-performance coaches to try and enhance their capabilities and that of future national teams. So these kids still belong to the clubs, but we trained them additionally during the day, and then we would involve them in national team camps. So I undertook that for 6 years. It was really enjoyable. I got to also work with the national under-17s and 19s teams during that time on a rotational basis. So working with the real elite in the country, that was beneficial for me, just to kind of see. I had never been at that elite level as a youth player, had never represented my national team. So it was good to see what attributes these kids had, how these kids then took their domestic form when we were assessing them for their domestic clubs, and how would that then translate into a national setup? Who were the ones that could deliver on a consistent basis? Who were the ones perhaps that needed a little bit more support whilst they're out with the club? And then also, how do you manage your stakeholder management? So as a coach, what information are you sharing back with the club about how the player's done on the camp? Or ahead of picking the team for the camp, what sort of questions are you asking about the player's performances? What questions are you asking about perhaps how the player deals with being in different situations? Has the player been out with his country before? How's he going to adapt to being away from mum and dad? So that gave me a bit of a broader skill set and understanding into how to work with players at that elite level, but also how to try and help them succeed in an environment that perhaps for some of them was new. And then obviously transitioning from there back into club football as head of coaching at Barnsley, whereby I was asked to...
Before you carry on, what attributes did they have?
Obviously, I felt their technical capability was really off the charts.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is the consistency of the delivery of that technical capability.
Mhm.
The consistency not only from training session to training session, but from the first minute of the game to the last minute of the game, as opposed to it being sporadic, which is maybe where some people still have a professional career. But with it being more sporadic, they're probably not going to get to real elite national team level. So that was for me was the most noticeable thing.
Okay.
The obvious one is their physical attributes in terms of all had fantastic speed, change of direction, jump capabilities, probably a little bit what Category 1 clubs in England use as a benchmark for identifying or retaining a number of their players, I would suggest.
Also, did they have academies in Japan?
So in Japan, the only academies where the oldest age group was under 18s at that stage.
Okay.
They trusted the school system. The school system was very disciplined, and essentially the players played for their school, and then if they were good enough, they played for a regional select team. And the Japanese FA trusted that system, as did the clubs. And as I say, before under 18, the clubs never really had any academy teams. Whereby now, as you'll appreciate, academy football is big business. It's big business from the extent that a lot of clubs have their own footballing philosophy, and they want that alignment to be reflected all the way through their academy. They also want to have a degree of protection that if they identify talent in their local area, rather than just leaving them within a school environment, the clubs obviously then take them in and are covered by any FIFA transfer of player and training compensation. So it's a thriving enterprise now amongst all the J League clubs.
Right. So you was at Barnsley coaching.
Yeah. So yeah, Barnsley, it just felt for me, I'd done 6 years with a national association. I loved it, but I wanted to get back into day-to-day team-oriented content and seeing the fruits of the weekly process emerge at the weekend, or not in some situations. And I was appointed head of coaching with a wide remit to write the coaching curriculum, support the development of the coaches, support the development and the recruitment of the players, and work alongside the academy manager to really try and improve the number of appearances made in the first team by academy graduates over a 3-year cycle. So it was a real conscious effort from everyone within that academy to have a willingness to be open to actually say, some of the stuff we're doing is good, but let's be brave enough to rip it up, look at what's good, continue that, but let's put in place some additions that are going to provide us with a more consistent delivery of player at the end of, at that stage it was under 23s, it's now obviously under 21s, at that stage it was 23s. How could we deliver a player for the first team? And that's what I set about doing over the next 3 years. And thankfully, in my last 2 years at the club, we put more than fourfold difference on the number of appearances compared to the previous 2 seasons. And that was just due to a little bit more focus, but also a little bit more engagement with the key stakeholders, the board of directors, the first team manager, about the talent coming through, about the performances of players in the under 18s and players in the under 23s. Because ultimately, if you're not going to try and promote verbally within your football club what is going well in an academy, then you can't expect the first team or the board of directors to just know, because ultimately they're so busy with the first team, and that's understandable. So it was really just a case of being really, really front-footed in how we both implemented the new processes, but also how we communicated performance across the wider football club.
Cool. So how did you get to Portsmouth?
Yes, so like anything in life, you probably find that you evaluate what you've learned in your role, and you probably want something more to fuel that learning. I've always been very learning oriented. I've always looked to try and make a difference where I've been. But once I feel I've made a material difference to positively deliver what I've been asked to do, then I also consider what is it that I want to keep progressing in. And for me, it was increasing my responsibilities of line managing not only one department, which was the coaching department at Barnsley. Now I wanted to expand that to line managing the whole academy. So I sought about looking for vacancies and was fortunate enough to be interviewed by an initial headhunting company who Portsmouth had engaged with to help them in the recruitment process.
Right.
And then after several successful stages with that headhunting company, I then progressed to discussions with the football club, senior staff and board of directors. And through those stages, I was then afforded the role that I'm currently in just now.
Brilliant. How long you been there?
So I've been 4 years now.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
it has flown by and it was quite strange. I was at an academy manager meeting just a fortnight ago in London with only the EFL academy managers. And actually, I wouldn't say I'm certainly not the oldest serving EFL academy manager in the same role, but I'm certainly maybe in the sort of upper 20% of people that have been in the role for that type of tenure, because it's a great role, but it's a very, very demanding role.
Trust me, I can imagine that. I can imagine, because you guys, and this is what I say, like, you guys have, like, when you've got the first team management, they have a playing staff of 18 to 25, and you guys have a playing staff of over 100. Like, if you take the under 9s to the under 18s, that's not including the coaches, that's not including all the departments that you guys look after. Like, to me, after the chairman, you've got a very seriously heavy responsibility at the club. Although, yes, the first team, their results affects the academy based on whether they're promoted or relegated. But with the amount that you have on your hands as an academy manager, it's a heavy role. It's a very heavy role. And that's why I'm
Yeah, I mean,
interested in talking to you guys, because
absolutely. Yeah, it's not lost upon me that, I have got a duty of care. My duty of care sits in two areas. My duty of care sits to the football club because they've entrusted me with this role and they've entrusted me to run the academy in a way that represents the city, that represents the values that we have as an organisation. But they've also entrusted me to look after, as you say, well in excess of 120 children. That's never lost upon me or my staff. We will get things wrong. We'll hold our hands up and say, yeah, we could have been better here. But we have to make sure that the experience that a young child has for however long he's in our academy is one that gives him some extra tools to enjoy life, to maybe implement when he leaves school or implement maybe even during school. So things like discipline. So we ask our players very simplistically, turn up with clean boots. And ideally, mum and dad, don't be cleaning the boots for your child. Now, that's easier said than done now because most football's done in Astro. So it's a quick wipe of the rubber crumb and away we go. But when you play on a grass pitch on a Sunday, you can get muddy boots. And we want that type of discipline to translate into maybe how a kid does something else elsewhere in their life, how they maybe learn to study for a school exam. Our values here are honesty, proud, stronger together. We're looking at those and how can we embed those in team talks? How can we make sure that the players are demonstrating them, that the staff are demonstrating them passion? Sorry, forgot passion, the fourth. How can we show passion in everything we do? So ultimately, we really understand the need for us to be educators, supporters of young people. The dare say, role models of young people, and just ensure that each and every kid's journey is as good as it can possibly be. Of course, there will be disappointment when that journey comes to an end, but hopefully through transparent communication during that season, we've given the parents an indication of where the decision at the end of the season is likely to go towards. We also show compassion. For example, when we are taking the hard steps to release a player, that parent will be phoned in advance at home, and they will then be given the chance to break the news to the child at home in the safety of having the emotional support of the family around them for that devastating news. And that's something from under 16s all the way down to under 9s that we ensure happens.
So how do you deal with release and retain periods of time?
It's actually occurring this week at the club for the U9s to U14s. It's a challenging time for my phase leads. So my role and the head of coaching's role at this time is just really checking in with them on a daily basis, making sure what do they need from us? Are we absolutely sure that the communication to the parent and to the player throughout the season has meant that whilst this decision will come as a disappointing piece of news, it shouldn't come as a shock. And that's something that we're really trying to get right every single season if we can. You then, as you'll be aware, there's now full-time player care officers within clubs.
Yeah.
That's when they really kick in. Yeah, so we now, like all other clubs, we'll do a check-in service with that family, probably after the first month of a release, and then it'll go to every sort of quarter thereafter, and that's available as long as the family want, up to and including 3 years. We also have a well-being team and a psychologist, and if they really felt when a player left us, they were having real challenges, either mental well-being challenges or actual psychological challenges, we would offer the services of our staff for a brief period of time to help that individual, or if they needed signposted, perhaps to a more professional body, i.e. a GP or a clinical psychologist, then our trained staff would be able to support the individual that way as well. So it's not lost upon us what that individual and their family have given to us for their time in our academy. And the least we can do is try and give them that support back. We understand initially that they probably won't want to hear too much from us because it might bring up painful memories. It might bring up regret, disappointment. But ultimately, we're doing it from a view that we care, and we don't want any child to leave our academy and be suffering.
So is that a group decision? How do you come to those decisions? Like, let's say if a boy is on an 8-week trial or a boy is about to get released, is it a group decision or is it one person? Is it you who makes that decision? How does that work?
Yeah, so the academy is split into phases. So our youngest phase is a foundation phase, then youth development, then professional development. Each phase will have a phase lead, and they'll also have age group coaches. So we'll canvass the opinions of the coaches. The phase lead will have watched the player several times. He'll have assessed them over the season. My head of coaching and myself, we'll either have watched the players in training, in games, or we record probably 25 to 50% of away games, but upwards of 60% of home games. So during the week, it's not unusual for us to go in and maybe watch the previous weekend's fixtures back on video. So we're formulating an opinion. Also, the longer you're in academy football, you get benchmarks in your head and you know what benchmarks a player should have. And then the final aspect that we also measure performance against is we have criteria that players are measured against for U9 to U13. when a position can be quite generic, but from U14s upwards, we measure the player against positional characteristics that we feel you need.
Okay.
So we can be really quite specific, i.e. a right back we feel should have at least 4 of the following things to go to the next level. So there's then lots
Do
of
they get-
regular
Did
discussion.
the right backs get told those 4 criterias?
No, we don't. And the reason we don't want to overload them, but they'll be very obvious. So during the season, we'll speak to them about their 1v1 defending. So quite clearly, that's one of their criteria. There might be their aerial challenges. So we make it quite simplistic. And then what we also started doing last season with the work of our fantastic analysis team, we started collating stats for our under 15s, 16s and 18s against certain metrics for the position. So we now have tangible data as well supporting what our eye is telling us. And essentially that process probably takes several weeks in advance of the end of the season, where we're having regular discussions, and then we reach final decisions, and then they're conveyed to the families, and then they're written into the reporting system that the academy uses to comply with the EFL and Premier League governance.
Wow. What category is your academy?
We're a Category 3 academy.
Okay. What would you say is youth development?
So youth development is probably where we shape our vision here at Portsmouth Football Club. We want to take a young boy with talent in football, and we want to give him an experience that's going to enrich his life. But make no mistake about that, with enriching his life, giving him opportunities, we also want to try and promote that young individual all the way through and into our first team. That for us is the ultimate youth development, but there is several facets to that. If someone falls a little bit short and leaves our programme, and we can see that our life skills programme has had a material impact in them, that we've maybe helped them identify the correct university course or college course that's going to be right for them, or that they've got a fantastic discipline that at the end of the scholarship, if they've not been given a pro deal, they're going to go and undertake maybe a trainee course as a trainee accountant and have the discipline to undertake that. So these are successes for us. Or if someone is released by us and gets picked up by another club, that's a success. We want young people to succeed. But ultimately, if we're looking at our ultimate goal is to get people into our first team. That's got to be, our priority of running the academy.
What do you do? Academy tours?
So in the Cat 3 world, finances are quite stretching at times. And although we're supported really well by our owners and our board of directors, we have a number of positions full-time that are not necessary to be full-time at Cat 3 level. So we predominantly do UK-based tournaments. The reason being the sheer cost. You find that if you're probably a Cat 1 academy, you're invited, all expenses paid, to a number of European tournaments, because the name of that club then draws in other paying clubs.
Right.
Whereas currently, our first team have done fantastic to reach the championship last season and then stay in it. So hopefully that starts promoting the name of our football club around Europe a little bit more. But we're in a position at the moment where domestic tournaments are favoured. And as an academy manager, I've got the tough decision. Do I take X £1,000 and use it on undoubtedly 1 week of good experience for 18 players versus perhaps putting on an extra 10, 15 games against Category 1 opponents, one-off games, for multiple kids, then I'm going to choose the latter at the moment when I have to make that choice, because
Right.
for me that maximizes the development of more than one squad within my academy.
Understood. Makes sense. What have you seen is the difference between grassroots players and academy players?
There's not always a difference. I think it depends when you recruit the individual. So let's go back to the start. For example, pre-academy in our environment is under 6, under 7, under 8 when you cannot register the player. And all of that time, you're just training grassroots players. Then as players start to take on board more information or be able to demonstrate a super strength more often than not, that to me starts to differentiate an academy player from a grassroots player.
Right.
A grassroots player will probably have less frequency of demonstrating that super strength or less successful outcome when demonstrating that super strength. It might be that they're choosing to do it at the wrong time, so i.e. their decision making is inconsistent, or it may just be that technically they don't have the competency to maybe deliver it as frequently as an academy player. That's certainly when I look at a Cat 3 world. When you're looking at a Cat 2 and a Cat 1 environment, I would say that certainly the physical ability of the player will be distinctly different between a grassroots player and an academy player. And that'll occur probably quite quickly before their under 10 season. And part of that reason is they'll probably go to training 3 nights a week from under 9s onwards in a Cat 1. So you measure that against a typical grassroots kid that might train 1 night a week. You're obviously going to get that physical output differential very, very quickly.
How have you dealt with parents who might approach you and say that they're not happy that little Timmy is not playing in his right position? How do you deal with those kind of situations?
Yeah, so you're not trying to be aloof first and foremost, but what you want to do, and we set this out we have an annual induction with every age group and their parents. We state, look, the best person who can deal with your inquiry initially is the phase lead. He's in and about your son's team all the time. He speaks with his coaches frequently. Please approach him. So that's the first port of call. Obviously, if they're unhappy with him or the resolution that he's offered, we'll then obviously say to the parents, then reach out to us and we'll just go and meet with them and listen to them. At the end of the day, they're our most important stakeholder.
Mm-hmm.
What we would try and do is as an educational piece and state that realistically, out with a goalkeeper, we probably wouldn't consider a fixed position up until late under 13s, early under 14s. We would actually encourage a bit of fluidity, that the player experiences multiple positions, clearly not in the one game. I think that's an information overload for a young person. But across the season, we would want them experiencing different formations and different positions. Equally, to try and engage appropriately with parents, we have a parent council where myself and another senior member of the academy staff will meet 3 times per season with elected parent representatives. And that's their opportunity as well to come forward and bring the views of each age group in our academy, ask for responses. We then go away and evaluate and see what we can improve on within that feedback. And then we send those minutes out to all the parents within the academy. And then at the end of every season, we do a player and parent survey, and ours actually concludes this week. And that helps inform any considerations for next season. It's critical we have high levels of engagement with our parents. They're our key stakeholder.
So it doesn't affect the child if the parent is just a bit too pushy and over opinionated, or does it?
No, as long as it's in an environment that's conducive to that. So we ask our parents to be supportive of a kid on a match day, but not coaching a kid. So as long as a parent doesn't approach a coach after a game and try and get involved in a heated argument, there's a time and a place for everything, but we're always willing to listen to the parents' concerns.
What's your take on timekeeping?
I think when you consider that from under 12 upwards, an academy has a 90-minute boundary for training and games to register a player. And I think you have to be a little bit realistic to the extent that if someone's going to make the effort to drive up to 90 minutes to get to your training, how can they possibly control traffic over that 90-minute journey? I think you also have to consider that the kid doesn't decide when to leave the house. The kid doesn't decide maybe they need to pull over and get petrol. The kid doesn't decide traffic. And the last thing we want to do is a kid who's so enthusiastic about his training is the minute he turns up late is that we critique him for it. The only thing we would ask out of courtesy is that when they step onto the field, they approach their coach and just acknowledge that they are late and just say, apologies for being late. And that's not a problem. The only issue is, it's a problem, is at under 18 level, where we run a full-time programme where the players are paid as footballers. This is therefore their workplace and therefore their standards around being on time, whether it's being on time at the start of the day, whether it's the head coach puts up meeting times, they have to be in the meeting room for these times. Ultimately, when you share a training ground like we do with the first team, timings have to be quite regimented, and therefore it's critical that each individual respects the times that have been set for each event.
So would they get fined, the older lot, if they didn't? How do you go about? What's the discipline for
Yes.
that?
So discipline is probably a conversation the first time. The second time it's a conversation to check for understanding. What is it they've not understood about the discussion the first time round? And then the third time, there will be a monetary fine, but obviously within the confines and regulations of the contract.
Right. Do you look at school reports at all?
Yes, so it's really important to us that we have a day release program for under 15 and under 16 players. And our head of education, in advance of inviting a player in, we will look at the players that are going to be retained and we will go and meet with their school, with their year head. And we'll ask for an updated report on the player. We'll ask for any special education needs that that player has in an educational setting, which we might not be aware of in a football setting. And then we'll agree a 4-way contract with the player, with the school, with the parent around the work that has to come in with the player to undertake when he's in on day release, and what work he will catch up on in a school environment that he misses whilst he is in on day release. So that's really important for us. And we work with the schools, and quite often young people will let you down. So it's a case of working with them in the school to say, okay, you've now been in exclusion situation within your school because of this event. You're now going to be excluded from our environment for a period of time. Or if something is continually, say it's low level, it's not leading to exclusion, but it's leading to the school having just cause to contact our head of education, then we'll invite the player and his parent in for a meeting and we'll ask them, what is the issue at school? How can we overcome this issue? Because if you're going to be afforded an under 18 contract in our environment, you actually have to undertake 12 hours of education each week as part of that scholar contract. So the last thing we're going to do is bring someone who's poor in an educational setting or not abiding by standards and discipline levels is bring them into our environment. So they go hand in hand. It's not around your grading that you achieve. We appreciate each kid is unique and different grading will be achieved. But behaviour, punctuality and discipline, they're non-negotiables.
Brilliant. So in transition from this stage to the first team, do you talk a lot to the first team manager in terms of transitioning boys to the first team, like to point out you should be looking out for such and such, or how does that work?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier in the call, I think that's part of your job in a senior academy role. You have to promote the good that is going on in your academy. So there's different avenues we do. So the infrequent one is most clubs will have a technical committee and I'll sit on that technical committee. There'll be members of the first team staff on that technical committee. There'll be members of the board on it. And we'll speak specifically about players or playing styles during those meetings during the season. Additionally to that, however, we've got shared video platforms. Our first team have got a development coach, so I encourage my oldest age group coach, which means from under 18s, I encourage him to have informal and frequent discussions with him on player performance. And then to be fair to our sporting director and our first team manager, they will attend some of the youth games, either in the evening, if we have an evening kick-off, or if we have a midweek game at the training ground and they're finished with first team training that day, they will come over. Because we're the oldest age group away from the first team, it's imperative that they have some understanding of what is going on in our environment. So it's critical that us, as an academy staff, we try and promote the talent that we have in the building. And that might be even just promoting a player at under 15 that's unlikely to fall on that first team manager's radar for at least the next 2 to 3 years. But ultimately, we're sharing information that 1, 2, 3 years down the line can maybe impact his squad succession planning. So if he has maybe an older player, 32, in a position, he might think, I might get another 18 months out of this player. What has the academy got that might be ready in the same position in 18 months? And it's my job to evaluate if we do genuinely have someone at that potential level. And then we try and say, okay, how can we start getting training opportunities with the first team? So we track all our first team training minutes and we try and make sure that the best performing under 18 players get several opportunities during that season to train with the first team. And at that stage, then it's down to the individual. How are you going to perform? Of course, we'll support you. We'll talk to you in advance. The psychologist might talk to you. Maybe if you've been over twice and you felt a little bit intimidated and therefore not showcased your talents as well as what you might have. So we'll maybe do some work with them then, or we'll ask the first team for some feedback. How is the individual done in your environment? And we'll share that feedback with the player because ultimately we want the player to get more opportunities, which eventually then leads to a firm contract offer at the end of the season.
So what qualities do you think, being an ex-pro, what qualities do you think it takes to be a pro?
I think you have to have a really strong and narrow-mindedness in the focus of what it is you want to do. I think you have to be brave enough to be different when different is needed. And what I mean by that is you could be option A, sit in the dressing room. You've got 90 minutes before the next session. You can have a laugh with your friends, sit and chill, or you could go and cram in some extra gym work or go and cram in some extra individual practice, maybe just go and hitting the ball against a wall. What is it you're choosing to do? So are you making the most of the opportunities in front of you? Are you accurately evaluating your performance So when the head coach is asking you to come at under 18s with your player clips from the previous week's training or games, are you just selecting the good bits so you get your ego massaged and a pat in the back? Or are you actually selecting a variety of clips so you can maybe delve deeper with someone more experienced into giving some corrective actions on the outcomes that didn't go successful, that weren't successful for you? Think there's ways and means. And then I think, unfortunately, some young people think that when they get that first contract, they're a pro footballer. With all respect, my definition of a pro footballer is someone that's played 20 first team games, 20 plus first team games, not someone that's never been on a first team pitch. You've just reached the next level. And then the last aspect is, unfortunately, although it's a brilliant time when you're there, if you drop your standards at any point, be ready for sitting in the bench, or worse still, sitting in the stand, because there's always someone coming behind you to take your spot.
I hear that. Last 4 quick fire questions for you.
Of
What
course.
qualities do you need to be a good academy player, good academy scout, good academy coach, and a good academy manager?
Okay, so academy player, what we're looking for is a player that plays with passion. So you don't need to rev up the engine. The minute you say training started, the player shows passion. He wants to be involved. The player wants to get on the ball. The player brushes off a mistake. Of course, mistakes can hamper any young person, but we want players that are brave enough to get on the ball and showcase their talent. And then obviously the older they get, you're looking for the level of talent and the frequency of talent. But right back at the start, at the entry point for under nines, what is your super strength? And do you play with exuberance? That's the key things we're looking for. Then in terms of the next one you touched upon was an academy scout. Academy scouting is really, really tough, because if you look at it, there is a large degree of bias in academy scouting to recruiting players born in Q1 and Q2. So we really have to do some work with our scouts around being aware of that bias. And actually, is the player having success based on talent, or based on the fact that he is either mentally or more physically ahead of his peers? So there's certain aspects about scouting. What we think has helped our scouts, I spoke earlier of, certainly from under 14s upwards, having some position specific criteria. So our scouts have that for scouting in the older age groups. For the younger age groups, they have just 5 general criteria, and they use that as their guide for recruiting players. Then there's the aspect around networking. You need a scout who's willing to be polite enough to not be intrusive, but also at the forefront to not miss out on all the best players. So it's about how they form relationships with clubs. We do a program that invites a lot of local grassroots clubs in for games. And we use that as a mechanism, not only to scout, but to build relationships and build rapport with teams in their recruitment
Like showcase stuff.
area. Yeah. So that's really for scouting. For a coach, it's a little bit tricky now. The academy world is very regulated. So technically speaking, you shouldn't be employing coaches who do not already have a UEFA B license. Part of me gets that. Part of me understands that if you're asking parents and players to commit to your program, you have to deliver a level of expertise in the coaches you put in front of them. But also, there's got to be some give and take, that maybe someone's on their B, they've maybe just retired from playing, etc. They clearly have got experiences and knowledge that can really make a material difference to the learning of that young individual. So we would always look at the merits of an individual, but we would try and always go first and foremost for them at least having a UEFA B. And then you want someone that wants to learn. Once again, it might be that that learning just comes from internal CPD that you deliver. It might come from them undertaking further FA or UEFA qualifications, because ultimately you have to make sure that each coach is able to embed the coaching curriculum in a way that the child enjoys, the child learns from, and the child is motivated to come back and perform within time and time again when they're working with that coaching team for that season. So there's a lot of characteristics to the coach. In terms of academy manager, it's probably not for me to say what makes a good academy manager. That's up to others to evaluate my performance and define. What I think, though, you need as an academy manager is high organisation. You have to be able to quickly switch your hat between maybe even jumping in to assist a session if you have a late coaching call off, to then the next day possibly in front of your owners and speaking to them about plans for the academy and how you may need either some additional financial support or time support to achieve the goals of the academy. You have to be able to engage with multiple stakeholders. So you have relationships with Premier League, EFL, you have relationships with parents, and just really have an all-round understanding and clarity to your staff that they know what is expected of them and they get a consistency back from you. I think that's critical. So people know where they stand, that you be you, but be you in a very consistent way to give staff confidence to go and do their jobs. That's what they have the skill set for.
Brilliant. So is there anything that I haven't covered that you'd like to say?
I think just finally, I was delighted to hear at the start you saying that you've reached out to a number of individuals and there's been a high take-up. I think there is a lot of negativity in the wider population around football academies. And I absolutely get that statistically, taking a young person from 8 years of age into a first team is a very, very tricky thing to do. But I actually think the journey that kids get, I can only speak of my academy, but in our academy, we believe that they get a real enriching journey that gives them a broad array of skill set, a broad array of experiences. And I would hope that they always look back upon their time in an academy as something that added to their life as opposed to something that was unpleasant or detracted from their life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on and speaking to me and sharing your knowledge.
No, much appreciated, Marvin. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. And that's the end of this episode. I hope you guys join me on another episode.
This episode is sponsored by the PV Consultant, the go-to business strategist for salon owners and solo beauty professionals who want to grow smarter, not harder. If you're ready to boost your visibility and start attracting more clients today, download the PV Consultant's free Google cheat sheet at www.thepvconsultant.net/cheat sheet. It's packed with simple, powerful tips to get your business seen by the right people. A big thank you to the PV Consultant for supporting today's episode and helping more businesses shine.